Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen. We got an absolute banger for you today. Tirreno-Adriatico Stage 2 recap, as well as Paris-Nice Stage 5 Healthy Aging Tour. Apparently, the weather in Holland, in the north of Holland, has been outrageously windy. Not even like, would be good for echelons, but more the level of it's unsafe for anybody to be outside windy. So that's been postponed, the ITT, until I think 1400, 1500, or maybe even 1600 time there. And I'm not even sure if it's going to go ahead. So obviously, that doesn't fit with our schedule with Benji working and me being in Australia. So we'll recap that tomorrow if that stage is able to go ahead. But first of all, we'll do Tirreno, which was a crazy stage, then Paris-Nice, separate YouTube videos for those, but one big podcast on the podcast players. Apologies for yesterday. Our podcast distribution software failed us, not for the first time, but hopefully the last. But that's been rectified now with all the other races put up in the one file on the podcast players. For this Tirreno stage, Benji, 201 Ks. It's just very difficult to figure out who could win it yesterday. Me and you, we picked about 10 different people who had a chance. A lot of elevation in the last third of it. Particularly, they had the, what's it called? Casciano climb, 4.5 Ks at 6%, and a narrow descent, and the Croce straight afterwards, 3.5 Ks at 7%, then a rolling plateau, then a short climb up to Monticiano, and then about 3-4 Ks of flat, and then this, I think I think it's more like a 5K or 5K climb proper if you don't count the 2Ks of false flat before, but 5Ks at about 4%, 3.5% to the finish line, with the last K being about 5% gradient. So we threw out a lot of names yesterday. Can you remember who we said? I think you might have said some more punchy riders than I did. I was looking more at Wout van Aert.
Yeah, I think you said Wout van Aert. I mentioned Van der Poel. We were in doubt who was going to be taking the lead at the Koenig, knowing that they've got Almeida, Ballerini, and Alaphilippe. So we were pretty unsure on who they were going to pick, knowing that this finish line could generally kind of fit all three of them. And we'll see throughout the stage if that played out for any of the three. I think those were the real names we mentioned. We named quite a few others, but I think we were pretty clear that it would be Wout van Aert or Van der Poel. So, yeah, we'll talk about it. But the stage started off. It's the typical Tirreno breakaway, to be honest. Simon Pelot, Burkhardt, Albanese, Archibald, Velasco van Spijbroek. Few Italians to get the KOM points and so forth, and that was the case once again. Albanese from Aiolo Cometa. He came over from Bardiani, I think, in previous years. He's in the lead of the KOM jersey after today's stage, so took quite a bit of points. He's now, I think, 2 points ahead of Bakeland, who took quite a bit of points yesterday. So, that's the standing of the KOM points, but this breakaway was going nowhere. The peloton was keeping it relatively under control. Jumbo was pacing pretty hard throughout the stage just to keep that on a solid margin. I think the action really started once we went into the Croce climb that we're speaking about, well, just a second ago, and also yesterday. That's the climb a good 30 kilometers before the end. That is likely to go and make the real differences, but we actually saw a bit of a move before it already, and that's, yeah, a bit of a surprise, I guess. We saw that Bonifacio was launching in the descent, pretty much in a similar way that he did, I think, in Milano San Remo a few years ago, where he had to apologize because he was displaying something that other people were copying outside of the sport. He tried to rejoin the breakaway there. We had Lotto trying to close that down from the peloton. Kwiatkowski made a bit of a surge there at the front of the peloton, tried to move out, made that attempt, and we also saw during that moment that the real guns that were expected to be at the front on the Croce climb to defend their position and their attack, the other favorites were moving up. The likes of Van der Poel, Van Aert were already in a good position there. I think that Jumbo didn't have too many people left there, right? I think they had only like 2 to 3 people left for the team.
Yeah, Rusin was dropping back. He's still in the group, but I think dropping back. They had Tobias Foss, I think, but I didn't really see him at the front. So, yeah, when Kwiatkowski started pacing really hard on Croce, it started to cause problems for them. And UAE, too, to be honest. Like, I think me and you are quick to criticize Jumbo-Visma a lot, but mainly because we think they have the legs. But UAE as well, struggling to control things for Pogacar too. Did you mention Benji Sagan at 45? So yeah, Sagan, I picked him to be top three today, more hopeful that he'd be back at sort of peak Sagan level. But yeah, he got dropped with 45 Ks to go. So the fitness is obviously not there at the moment. Perhaps, yeah, the easy bunch sprint yesterday was just that, a lot easier than today's stage. But yeah, where do we get to, Benji? You said Bonifacio. Is it now time for the Bernal big attack?
Yes, yes, yes. Moving on to the last 35 kilometers, Kwiatkowski had made that move, had surged already, and it was time for Egan Bernal to try something. Pretty solid attack, to be honest. And I don't know, I always feel like attacking like on this section of the parkour is likely to go nowhere. But I think that the entire situation is that you need someone with you. Bernal can't attack there and make it alone. And I think that was also kind of a problem there as well for him. I think Asgreen followed him for a bit. De Buist followed him. Vermeer was trying to attack to close the gap. But those are not really the names that you would expect trying to counter Bernal for GC.
De Boist was sitting on, he wasn't pulling for Wellens. Askren was pulling. Um, even though they had Alaphilippe behind. Ballerini had been dropped, so we thought it might be Ballerini today. I think he was working earlier, but they were riding for Alaphilippe today and Almeida, quick step. But yeah, they got a decent gap, but it was more that it split the race open. Like, yeah,
Yep.
they only got 5 to 10 seconds, but then all these other riders saw Jumbo Visma struggling or no one really controlling things, and attacks started pinging off the front. Marc Soler, Quinn Simmons, Igita, Vermeersch, Benji already mentioned, Bilbao, Andre Zeitz, Tim Wellens trying to bridge across to his teammate Jasper de Boist. Really good to see. Even Yates and Almeida, I think Benji had attacked at that point. So, like, having GC contenders, definitely Yates, Bernal, maybe Sivakov and Almeida. You might count them as GC contenders. Attacking with 30 Ks to go is great to see. Why do you think Bernal attacked there, Benji? Like, what's the rationale for that? If when Pogacar's not attacking there,
I find it difficult. I think that this finish doesn't really fit Bernal to take home the victory. And I think that attacking here isn't going to lay him vulnerable for the finish because the finish it's not the easiest finish, but it's also not the finish where you will lose 30 seconds to a minute if you have a bit of a bad day as a Bernal. So I think that it's a pretty riskless move looking at the other side of the mountain towards the finish line, that there's not really too much area for a Pogacar to drop a Bernal afterwards if it fails. It's unlikely to get countered on this. And eventually he did really get countered. He got caught back up by the peloton, and we indeed had that attack from Yates, Sivakov, Landa, and Almeida. And that was really the group that actually got a bit of a margin on the peloton. I think it was a good 10 seconds earlier on, and then it started enlarging to 20, 25 seconds, but not really more than that. Who was pacing at the peloton at that moment? Was it Jumbo with Voss? Yeah.
Jumbo had Foss and Rusen, I think. Maybe it was just Foss at that point, and then Rusen eventually came back on the flatter sections. But yeah, it was mainly Jumbo Visma. UAE weren't helping particularly. It was Rusen eventually helping at 20 to go. So a group of Landa, Sivakov, Almeida, Simon Yates. Really unusual group. Like a mixture of GC
Yeah.
contenders and second tier GC contenders on their own teams, possibly like Almeida and Sivakov. So I know that's why this race is so good. Tirreno-Adriatico, a stage like this, it was just like impeccable stage design, and the riders here made the most of it as well. There was some weird intermediate sprint confusion with 15 or 14 Ks to go. They'd drawn looked like a child had drawn with some chalk on the road, and it wasn't even signaled that there was an intermediate sprint, and Sivakov took 3 seconds ahead of
Yeah,
Yates
but
and Landa. Yeah.
there's more than that because it was so confusing for the front four riders because on paper it was supposed to be 500 meters past the 15K mark, 14.5K to go. Now, I think that Sivakov saw that it wasn't. It was before the 15K mark and not on the 15K mark, but like 10 meters in front of it. So
Big brain
Sivakov
Sivakov.
launches. We see Simon Yates responding to that. Almeida's at the back like, huh? what's happening here? Then Lando's sprinting, but he can't really do that very well, so he's kind of just following in their wheel. And Sivakov
Try.
and Yates are like signaling each other while sprinting, like, well, what are you doing, man? Come on. And we see that Sivakov stops sprinting at the line that it is the actual intermediate sprint. So Sivakov on paper would take the points, I think, ahead of Yates and Landa. But Almeida was like, no, it's a 15K mark. That's going to be the end of the sprint for me.
Yeah.
So he launches past everybody and decides to stop sprinting just at the 15K mark. But obviously, that's nothing. I don't know. If I'm the Koenig in this situation, I genuinely ask to void.
It should be annulled, yeah. I think so. You can't just draw it in chalk on like a kilometer before it was supposed to be on the road book. That's ridiculous. Imagine if that affected GC at the end of this race. I would love to see it. I mean, Benji,
Imagine.
me and you got to have content to talk about, and I got to have stuff to make videos about. So just as well, cycling has things like this happening. But yeah, interesting to me, Benji, was I want to talk about this properly. We've had Bernal attack all those attacks going up the road. Wout van Aert had his Jumbo-Visma teammates initially not there, and then they come back on the flatter sections, Rusin. I think I particularly have accused Jumbo-Visma of being inflexible a lot of the times. I think their plan in the bus this morning was control, get to finish, pace Wout van Aert. Wout van Aert sprints for finish. And that is a good plan. A lot of teams would be jealous of that plan because that plan has a very high likelihood of Wout van Aert coming in the top 3 at a minimum.
Yeah.
But when you've got Bernal going, so Ineos won't chase, especially with Sivakov there, Almeida going up the road with Askren, Wellens, Higuita and co, and UAE looking like they can't pull the skin off a custard and Pogacar has to sit in.
Okay,
Who do you
sorry.
think, if Wout van Aert is really here for GC, which I think he is, especially with the jersey on his shoulders, and this principle is going to apply to the Tour de France because he's going to have most likely, I think, the yellow jersey on his shoulders at some point in the first 5 stages. Once you have the jersey on your shoulders, they're going to defend it because he climbs well enough. Why are you pulling Pogacar back again, who I think is the biggest GC rival to Wout van Aert, or the main GC threat? When Wout van Aert's biggest advantage against Pogacar is to get bridge and get into that break and work with that break. Hey, Van der Poel might have come with him. That's
Yep.
great. Work with him. And if Van der Poel beats you for the stage win, but you still got a gap, hey, that's still good. Am I missing something for why Wout van Aert didn't attack? Now, maybe he didn't have the legs, sure. But I'm assuming he actually might have if all these other riders were able to who are not as good as him. Do you think Wout van Aert trying to bridge into that group would have made sense, Benji?
Would have made sense. I think it also would have been a logical move at that point. I think that if we were in a DS car at that moment, which we really can't do, like generally I couldn't drive a car like that in any way. Then again, a DS should not be driving the car in our opinion. Anyway, if we were making the decision there, I think that I would indeed have said Van Aert should react because, like you mentioned, UAE is in that group. They're going to have to react if you do something. And you've got Van der Poel who will need to react on you. But Van der Poel was a bit in a bad position
Yeah.
from that point onwards already. I think he was like in 15th wheel or something during that moment of the race. He came a bit closer towards the end, but it wasn't ideal. We'll speak on it a bit further. And I think that Van der Poel perhaps wouldn't have not been able to react so easily. He might have had to like move up first and then react, which would have had them attack alone. And I don't think it would have worked with a duo attack there just because of that problem. But I do think that doing something with Van Aert, opening up a race early, smashing it, is one way to gain seconds on stages like today on GC riders. That's a specialty, attacking and doing the unexpected perhaps sometimes as well. And I think, like you mentioned, that Jumbo had a strict plan and kept themselves on it. And yeah, they kept the peloton in check, but did they bring back the riders in the front? I guess we'll see in a second once we'll go over it. But we had indeed those Jumbo riders still creeping up towards that breakaway. The gap was staying the same. Almeida and Sofo were working together relatively well at that point after that little incident at the intermediate sprint. And I think that Almeida was likely one of the better engines in that front group, to be honest. In that Jumbo train, well, can't call it train with 2 to 1 people then, but they were not really getting too much closer at a certain point. 22
Yeah, it was
seconds,
staying at
21
20.
seconds, I think
Just
13
staying at
kilometers to
20.
go or so.
Yep.
And then another team decided to join the party, and that's indeed the team you mentioned just a second ago. Pogacar's team UAE started to move up. The likes of Maika in first. Surprises me every single time so far that Maika is ahead of Formolo and
Because he's
Polans.
the weak. Because he's not as strong as those two.
Yeah, and that's something you do not expect from the transfer season last year. We mentioned already that we didn't know how Maika would be as a domestique for someone. I don't remember in his life if he ever domestiqued for anybody. Perhaps in the Saxo Bank days or something, the Tinkoff days. Saxo Bank is a
Maybe for
bit older.
Contador,
Yeah,
like in 2014 or something, but I can't
yeah,
remember it either. I was only like 6 then. Polance is their strongest. Polance is their strongest domestique. He's stronger than Formula right now.
I
I
agree.
think he's more consistent, and they just trust him way more too.
Yep, and I think we saw that again. Confirmation today with Micah going fast, not really getting too much closer. I think he got close to like 17 seconds, but then the gap started
No,
going
he
up
let it
again.
out.
Yeah, it went up again after a bit, and that's not ideal, obviously, if you're trying to catch someone, that the gap goes up. Formula in this wheel took over. It got closer, but not totally. It was like a good 15, 14 seconds with Formula at the front. They were already on the last climb, which is that climb that gets exponentially steeper towards the end, but is also
Four
not
Ks to
super
go.
steep at the end. Yes, 4K to
Four
go.
Ks to go, about 12, 13 seconds when Formula begins to pull hard.
Yes. And then it was Polans taking over, but what did you think at that moment? We saw in the front group Almeida, Sivakov, Yates, and Landa were starting to battle a bit. I think that Sivakov was the first to attack. I'm not actually sure at this point, but I think Sivakov was the first to make a little move. We saw Yates respond to that, and I think it was a bit of a fight of attrition because Yates was the first one to drop, and he did not only drop from this group, he got caught by the group behind and then got dropped in the group behind. So he's clearly not in the form that I expected from him GC wise if he has to drop here, but I guess it's fun that he showed something today. I don't know.
Nah, well, he dropped himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really strange. He lost. I don't know what happened. Whether he had a mechanical, he lost a minute. He lost a minute and 22 seconds, Benji, after being in a breakaway, clear of 5 seconds clear of the peloton, with 1,200 meters to go. So he literally stopped pedaling. To lose that much time is crazy. So I don't know. I don't know what happened with Simon Yates. He cracked really badly, but you know who didn't crack? Almeida again, the Portuguese sensation. His second attack, he just seems to be able to dig deep into the well multiple times. Almeida. It looked like Fellini for Astana running for Arambaru was going to bring them back. A K to go. Astana would sort of, they brought that gap down to 4 seconds, but Almeida kicked again, brought it out to about 5 or 6 seconds. It was getting pretty steep at this point. I couldn't really tell. No one was really taking over. UAE were done. Van der Poel was in really bad position, really deep. He was like
Astana
20th.
came to the front.
Yeah, starting at the front with Fellini,
Yeah,
bringing
yeah,
him
sorry.
back. But then after Almeida attacked, they pretty much ran out of steam. I think they were running for Arambaru. And it was Geraint Thomas for, I don't know who for, Benji.
For himself, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't know if he thought this was where was the stage he beat Pinot back to back Alpine stages, mountain stages in when he like started sprinting with 800 meters to go in the saddle. But
2018 tour, right?
yeah, in 20 I can't remember the mountaintop
Yeah, me
finish.
neither. Doesn't
Rosier,
matter.
yeah. It must have been for Bernal though, because I didn't really understand it. Because if it's not for Bernal, why are you leading out with Alaphilippe, Wout van Aert, and Mathieu van der Poel in your wheels? And then Bernal, I think maybe Bernal was on Wout van Aert's wheel, and Pogacar was there, and Van der Poel was a bit deeper. So anyway, into the last 500, Thomas pulling like crazy. Thomas pulled was the reason Almeida got caught. Alaphilippe's on Thomas' wheel. He sees we're in the last 300 meters, 250. Almeida's dying. It's pretty steep, 5% gradient. Alaphilippe kicks before they catch Almeida. So Portuguese Twitter is absolutely kicking off right now on the De Koenig post. Go and check the De Koenig post on Twitter. And the replies now. Alaphilippe kicks out of the group looking like he's chasing his own man, but he obviously had to do it. gets into Almeida's slipstream for a moment, then kicks round him in the last 100. He gapped Wout van Aert a little bit when he initially kicked Julian Alaphilippe. Van der Poel was coming from so deep, and Alaphilippe was able to hold onto the line despite Wout van Aert, I don't know, looking like he left his sprint late, but I think he was actually fatigued. And Van der Poel actually came second behind Alaphilippe, hitting the line super hard. Alaphilippe looked over his right shoulder. He looked like it was like Liège all over again. He's like, "Ooh, I'd love to deviate, but I don't even need to." Posted up about 20 meters too early before the line. I love it now. It gave me a heart attack because Van der Poel was charging at him so fast and then hit the
Yeah.
line to come second, Van Aert third. What a finish, Benji, to that stage. Do you think Alaphilippe had to attack, right? Almeida would have been caught.
Yeah, for certain. And I think that it likely would have been Van der Poel if he didn't attack Alaphilippe, because we saw Van der Poel had a crazy kick, but he started off once again in a terrible position. And it's like become so consistent that we notice that Van der Poel is in a pretty bad position before something rather adventurous happens. And this is kind of where you need to be relatively at the front when you're nearing the last kilometer of a stage. And he got, I think, seventh wheel or eighth wheel at a certain point into the last corner. And if you're seventh wheel then, and you know that two of the riders ahead of you are domestiques, or even Thomas was still there ahead of him, the rider that launched the initial attack there, but obviously wasn't going to have another sprint left afterwards, so had to go around that person to move to the line, then that's how you lose a race, man. And yeah, Van der Poel would likely have won if Alaphilippe didn't attack, because he'd have more time to move up. And I still think that Almeida would 100% be caught either way. But yeah, I think Van der Poel lost it today rather than Alaphilippe win it, perhaps. Which, I don't know, is that a sentence?
Yeah, I think that's right, to be honest. It was such a great stage. I was a little bit confused by what Ineos did, I guess. They worry about Almeida having seconds on GC ahead of Bernal at the end there. But yeah, here's the results. Alaphilippe first, Van der Poel second, Wout van Aert third, Pogacar fourth. I mean, what a lineup. 1, 2, 3, 4. Aramburu fifth.
Aramburu!
Aramburu fifth. Yeah, best of the rest, I guess. Stannard sixth. Almeida held on for seventh. Greg Van Avermaet eighth. Wellens ninth. Ciccone 10th. Vendrame 11th. Bernal 12th. Just finished in front of Thomas 13th. Igita Benji 5th, 14th.
Aliotti.
Aliotti 15th, but you'd think Igita would be better on a finish like this.
Yeah, I think that we're overrating his punch a bit this year, because I think in UAE as well, his punch was not where we expected it to be, and today neither. I don't know. But who's also there, 27th, the legend himself, Michael Goggle.
But the people who lost time today were Simon Yates, 1:22. So he's out of GC. He's done for GC. So that's just really strange. But yeah, Wout van Aert keeps his lead on his leader's jersey by 4 seconds ahead of Alaphilippe, who moves up 135 places into second. Van der Poel third on GC, 8 seconds back. So in terms of Van Aert's lead on the GC contenders, he's got a 14-second lead on Pogacar, 4 seconds ahead of Alaphilippe, if you count him as that. 11 and 13 ahead of Sivakov and Landa, respectively. And yeah, 14 is pretty much against the main contenders, Quintana, Bernal, etc. But what, we are being treated by Tirreno-Adriatico already. It's been like this for years. It's such an exciting race. And even tomorrow is not a simple stage either. From Monteciano to Gualdo Tadino. It's also a mosquito trying to get me. No, not today, buddy. Not today. Don't edit out that violence, Benji. Monteciano to Gualdo Tadino, 219 Ks, long stage. It's rolly really rolly for the first third of it. Then there's the Poggio della Croce climb, the only main one, 4.4 Ks at 7.5% in the middle of the stage. Intermediate sprint about 165 Ks in, and then the finish is tricky again. I'm going to need to go on the Flamme Rouge website and see this, Benji. It's not a climb, but it's undulating, so we can't say it's a fake news climb. But it's like 1.7 Ks at 3.1%.
Fake news flat section?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just so weird, this finish. I'm going to need to go study it properly and look at it like every 200 meters. But I think the same names: Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, Alaphilippe, Adam Baru. I think tomorrow will suit the proper sprintier guys, or like sprinter puncher guys, more than today. Or do you think that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty sprinty. And I think there's one man that I push forward, and I think there's another man that we also push forward, that we also pushed forward yesterday. And those are Van der Poel and Van Aert. I think this fits Van Aert better, personally, but I wouldn't be
Caleb Ewan.
surprised if Van der Poel's up there as well. What?
Caleb Ewan.
Actually, it's difficult because like 2 years ago, and every single time he goes on Hatterdam, you would say yes, but it's not super simple, is it?
The final kilometer looks flat, or like 0.51%. It's from the steeper parts are from 3 to 1, and there's a flatter section. Oh no, more like from 2 to 1. If you can just make that, so I think Ballerini Benji. Have you heard of him? He's been pretty good in the preseason, early season, but
Yep.
he didn't look as good today. Ballerini. This reminds me of the Tour de la Provence Stage 2 finish, Benji, which Ballerini won a little bit, up and down. Oh, it's going to be a good finish tomorrow. I can't wait. You think breakaway? It's such a long stage, 221 k's. You're the breakaway whisperer. Got a lot of climbs early. Could be difficult to control.
Yeah, they can definitely try to set something up, but it's gonna be relatively simple, I think, for Jumbo to control it until the climb. Voss is there, and you've also got who was the other guy today? Well, they've got two people that they had today
Gross
after the climbing, which means
and
that
Hessing.
it depends on how fast that crotch is getting ridden in the middle of the stage again, and that will decide if they have enough people to keep controlling it after the hill. But I think they can do it, man. Like, it's one proper hill in the middle of the parkour, and then it's false flat terrain with some smaller hills that likely won't influence the likes of a Jumbo. So yeah, I think that they'll be able to control the race, Jumbo. I don't think a breakwell will succeed. Yeah, I think that the likes of a Pogacar also. I think that he'll just wait until the mountain stage. He knows he's one of the better riders there, so he he probably trusts himself to drop Van Aert there.
I'm looking to see big gaps on GC. Bettiol, 9 minutes back. Mark Padun, Bodnar, they're all options. Madvert Schmidt, Christopher Yule Janssen, Thibaut Pinot lost 9 minutes, maybe deliberately, Benji. Lilian Calmejin, Puccio for Ineos, Nons Peters. I reckon a pretty strong break might get away. I think a breakaway could be a decent option, but who knows? But yeah, that was a great Tirreno stage today, and I think it'll be a really good one again tomorrow. They're pretty lucky RCS, I think, with the quality of field they've got lining up at Tirreno Adriatico.